His name was Benjamin. And I remember when I first met my wife, she had this very distinct shape of her lips. And both of my kids that are living had that. And when I saw Benjamin for the first time, he had that same exact shape.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a place where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter.
And I'm Lee. We are grateful you joined us today. Please note that this is a story of loss and has triggers.
Thanks to our lost parents who are willing to be vulnerable and share their children with us.
If you're listening to this podcast, just know that on our YouTube channel there are pictures and videos that are related to the stories that are being shared.
Subscribe and share it with a friend that might need it and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us. Today we are talking with Scott, whose son Benjamin was stillborn. So Scott, thank you for coming on, and thank you for talking with us. And we've talked a little bit about, just getting to know each other beforehand. And Scott is a little bit of a writer himself, so he's going to wax poetic about everything and have deep philosophical thoughts. And one
I'll
of them.
say, Lee, I'm better with putting pen to paper. not so eloquent. I try to be a little bit eloquent, but I'm able to write and articulate my thoughts better on page. But I'll do as good as I can.
Well, don't worry. I don't do that on page or in words, so I sound like
at least I got one leg up there.
Yeah, well, good. I was going to say I sound like an idiot no matter where I go. So, well, thanks for coming on again. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're living at in general terms, and what you like to do.
Sure. So I'm a real estate investor in North Carolina. I live here with my wife and my two kids. We have a little bit more. We're a little bit out in the country. I got a couple acres out here, but I'm pretty close. As I said, I'm a real estate investor, so I've got some flips and things like that going on. So I'm able to keep an eye on it. We had an Airbnb in Florida that we sold a little while back, and then we still have one in Colorado. So we enjoyed going out to Colorado. We got back about a month ago from a little trip out there. Got to go to New Mexico, which was really nice. So we enjoy some traveling. Probably going to take a trip later this year. And, I just like spending time with my wife and kids. I like to go to the gym, lift weights. Not a big cardio guy, but I enjoy lifting weights, try to maintain my strength.
Yeah.
As you said, I do enjoy writing. I do it periodically in big spurts where it kind of consumes my life for a little while. Started on a passion project earlier this year. Wrote probably 40,000 words in about a 3-month span.
Oh, man.
Got a little burnt out. Got my second win. Did it again, and then kind of fizzled out. So I'm planning on taking a little bit of a hiatus from social media and diving back into it full time. Not full time, but devoting a big chunk of my time to it. So,
well, may I ask, are you published, or is?
No, I haven't done anything. I've never really submitted it to be published or anything like that. I'm planning to later this year. Just kind of, it's a very delicate thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's you're putting a piece of your soul out there,
Yeah.
for everybody to see. So everybody's afraid of rejection, but I'm going to edit it, make sure that it's the best that it could absolutely be, and then I'm going to put it out there.
Well, good luck with that. That's awesome. Yeah, and good luck with sending your soul out to heartless people who will. So, well, good. You're back east. You have a nice little family. Tell us about how you met your wife.
So we met at our church. We were going to church at the time in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we met there. And she was in my Sunday school class. I was looking for a wife at the time, and she was just kind of looking to be left alone.
Yeah.
And, I kept noticing her over there. I knew she was a Ukrainian immigrant. And so I started thinking and praying. I was like, Lord, I really, I kept feeling like there was something about her. And so I got this idea to write her a note. And so I spent probably an hour researching what language to write it in. I had no idea. I had heard about Ukraine. You hear about it in the news with Russia and things like that, but you don't you don't think about that
Yeah.
until you have a person there from that country in front of you. At least I didn't.
Yeah.
But I started researching it. I found that most people there know Russian, are able to speak and communicate in Russian. So I wrote a note for her in Russian. It was 2 sentences. Took me 30 minutes. And so I gave her this note as I was getting ready to go back up to West Virginia before I moved down to North Carolina full time. And she started texting me the next day, and we've been together ever since.
Oh, wonderful. I know Russian. I speak Russian, so
Do you
it's
really?
yeah, it's I I went and did a humanitarian mission in Russia 2 decades ago. So yeah, it's a the Cyrillic alphabet is a hard alphabet too.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. So, but I love the Ukrainian people. So tell Veronika. Yeah, I don't speak Ukrainian, but здравствуйте, I think is hello in Ukrainian. So здравствуйте,
Здравствуйте.
здравствуйте. So
That's Russian. Yeah, Russian.
yeah, здравствуйте is Russian, but yeah. Well, sweet. So, uh, 2 sentences has changed your life. You and Veronica, how long did you guys date? Are you guys married, or are you just together, or?
Yeah, so we got we were together in January of 2014, and we ended up getting married in November of that same year.
Oh,
So
very
we got
nice.
married less than a year after I gave her the note.
Yeah. Well, powerful words. I can't wait to read your books, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. And then you moved down from West Virginia to North Carolina. Been there ever since?
No, so I was in North Carolina for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a job selling copiers. Did that for a couple of years. It helped bring out, I guess, my inner salesman. I had a lot of success with that. I was able to feed my family for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I felt like God wanted me to be in real estate. And so I got my real estate license on a whim, jumped in, did the realtor thing for a couple years. Absolutely hated it. I hated showing houses to
Oh yeah.
people. I hated just, when I was starting out, there's a lot of rural places in North Carolina. There's 50, 60, $70,000 houses. And that was a lot of the clients that I was getting. I
Yeah.
was on a team, and so the leads would kind of filter down. And so I was getting a lot of these leads where I was driving an hour and 15 minutes away to show somebody a
Yeah.
$50,000 house, just praying that they would buy it so I could have $800 for the month or something like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for that deal. But then I started working with investors, got into that side of it until I could start investing on my own.
Oh,
So we bought a property in Florida, and we went down there to get it ready to Airbnb. So we were down there for about 6 months, and that was actually where my son was born and passed away.
mm,
So right after that, we were getting ready to go. I'd bought a couple months prior, bought a place in Colorado. So we left
yeah.
Florida about a month. I'd say it's about 6 weeks after my son passed to go to Colorado to kind of do it all again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Very healing and therapeutic for us.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from a location. So,
Yes.
well, sweet. It seems like you have moved quite a bit, and now you're pretty settled down where you're at now, or are you like, hey, in about 4 months we might be moving out of here too?
We'll be here for at least 18 months. We've been here 6 so far. Veronica, she wants to be back in Colorado.
Oh yeah,
We miss the hiking. We would go hiking
yeah,
every week, sometimes twice a week. Just a view of the mountains.
yeah,
Um, just being out there in general was just such a freeing experience. And
yeah,
so she wants to be back out there. My plan is to just get some flips and stuff done here and then try to get back out there. We still got our place out there, but she doesn't want to live in that house. So
yeah,
I got to maneuver some things around. But we're here for the time being.
Yeah.
After what we went through, and then a year of living in projects while we were getting them ready, it's nice to have somewhere where we can settle down and
Yeah.
just really kind of figure out who we are again and get a sense of a return to normalcy.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I suggest making the trip over the mountains? Come to Salt Lake. That's where we're at. Yeah,
I hear it's beautiful. I have always wanted to see it. I think is it Provo?
Uh, Pro-
Bravo?
yeah, there's Provo, one of the bigger cities here. Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah,
I have
it's right
my
up.
my old business partner. He's from Salt Lake, born and
Oh
raised.
yeah,
So he said it's beautiful over there. I've
yeah,
always wanted to go. We
yeah.
probably head over that way sometime soon.
Well, it's better than Colorado in every single way except for one. So,
What's that?
well, uh, Colorado has passed some legalization of some stuff. So yeah,
Okay, I
so
got you.
we got better snow. We've got better mountains. We don't have all of the major sports teams, but we've got better sports teams.
Okay.
But
I
yeah,
think the Nuggets just recently won a championship, though, didn't they?
yeah. Well, they,
And I think the hockey team
yeah,
did too.
um, yeah. But Utah's getting a hockey team next season, so yeah,
Okay,
we got the Jazz, we got the hockey. We might be getting a Major League Baseball, and we've got Real Salt Lake, the soccer team. So, bada bing, bada boom.
there you
We're
go.
we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna compete. We're gonna compete. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I sure do love Utah. So yeah.
I hear good things. We were when we went to Colorado last month. We took a little trip down into New Mexico.
Oh yeah, there's some
Have you ever
beautiful.
been down there?
Yeah, yeah.
That was a really cool experience. I'm trying to get more states in, the kids to see more states. So we stopped in a little place called Taos. Julia Roberts has a ranch there, like a
Oh
40-acre ranch. Just a beautiful little town.
yeah,
Just really
yeah,
cool to see another state. So
yeah. It's Santa Fe is gorgeous. Up in the high, is it called the High Peninsula or something like that? I don't know, but yeah, New Mexico's got some magical places about it. So
yeah.
well, sweet. Let's now talk about your son Benjamin. When how did you guys find out that you were pregnant? Were you wanting to get pregnant again?
Yes. So this was we were trying to have a son, or trying to have a baby.
I'm trying to have a child.
You know, I wanted another son, and I don't remember exactly how my wife told me with Benjamin. I remember my other how she told me with my other two kids. With my son Daniel, I was driving Uber at the time because I was in my very first year of real estate,
Yeah.
really, really struggling. And I came home late on New Year's Eve, and that was when she gave me the test. But for some reason, I cannot remember how she told me. I don't know if I blocked it out of my mind or
Hmm.
what, but I don't remember exactly how she told me she was
Yeah.
pregnant with it.
Well, that's okay. The mind does things to protect yourself, and so
It does.
and sometimes you'll have a mental block, and months later it will clear up, and you'll be able to remember details when it's not going to harm you. I guess would be a good way to put it.
Hmm.
So you were wanting to have another child, and again, Benjamin would be your third child, correct?
You've been my third child.
Yeah, he is your third child.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you guys excited? Or you were trying, but once when the rubber hits the road, sometimes you're like, oh, we've gotta change some stuff around. Were you guys?
It
Uh,
was, that was definitely, there was some shifting around going around in my mind.
yeah.
'Cause at the time, so my wife, as I told you, she's from Ukraine, and she had her grandma over there. Her grandpa was still there. He had just passed away from COVID, actually. So March of 2022, my wife's aunt, her cousin, and her grandma came, and they stayed with us. So we had a three bed, two bath house at the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Already four people living there, so we had three more people come to live with us.
Yeah.
But her aunt and cousin had gone a couple months later to go stay with my wife's mom out in Texas. And so her grandma was still living. So we still had that bedroom taken up. And so we moved down to Florida for a little bit. I remember when we found out it was a boy, my wife came back from her appointment. 'Cause typically we would have gone, but now we've got two kids. It's harder to
Yeah.
get them in doctor's office. Plus, her grandma was with us. She had gone to her appointment and she came back, and I remember she pulled up and she was in the driveway. And so I go and I sit in the car, and she's got tears streaming down her face. And that was when she had gone to find out what we were having. And so she tells me that he has something called a single umbilical artery.
Oh, yes.
So it's not really a cause for concern, but it could be a cause for concern, is what I remember. And I remember just feeling my stomach just
Yeah.
drop. And she told me it was a boy. I just remember we were worried about the single umbilical artery. From what they could tell, it looked like we were supposed to have twins.
Hmm.
And so one of them, I guess, didn't take or something. I don't know the exact medical term that they use, but
Yeah.
I guess when they have a pregnancy, and I could be wrong on this, but from what I could understand, there's usually when there's a pregnancy, you got a baby with two umbilical arteries, and then when there's twins, there's one for each or something, as far as I
Okay.
could tell.
Yeah.
But they said it looked like the second embryo didn't take or something like that. So I just remember her telling me that, and them telling us that it could be that a lot of times you see this. It doesn't mean that the child will have Down syndrome, but children with Down syndrome have a single umbilical artery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily, so we were just preparing for that. So, that was around, I'd say, the halfway point where we found
Okay.
out what we were having, and then found out that there could be a complication. So she was considered high risk throughout that process.
Yeah. Okay. Our son had a single umbilical artery as well. So when you're talking about that and just the pit in your stomach of knowing they're not going to be getting as much nutrients and stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
I can fully empathize with you because it really is sort of scary knowing I was too much of an idiot to understand everything that could have happened. I was just like, oh yeah, he's doing okay. But so did you guys get testing, genetic testing to rule out any genetic issues, or did you just go
No, we
forward with me?
didn't. We didn't do anything like that. We were gonna keep our son either way.
Yeah, fair.
But it was just they said they didn't see anything or detect anything. He was developing perfectly. There was
Yeah.
no issues or anything like that. So they didn't see anything that looked like it. Of course, there's no way of knowing, without 3D imaging and things like that. But no, we didn't do any kind of testing or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah. Progressing. How did the pregnancy go? How did everything progress? You're scared. You're in a different state. I guess you've been in Florida before, but everything progressing well for you guys?
Um, so she had a pretty traumatic pregnancy.
Uh-huh.
It was not like this with our other two kids.
Yeah.
She was nauseous the entire time, every
Oh,
single day. She was just constantly looking for something to kind of take away that nauseous feeling that she had.
yeah.
She started to have the veins pop out on her legs. She'd never had that before.
Mhm.
Um, it was just really, it was a really tough pregnancy for her.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, you know. As a man, I have no clue how that is. I have no no I
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm I'm sorry for her. I'm sorry for you guys, but anything that she did to alleviate that? Did you guys find any solutions
No,
or just
it was just
suffer?
that the entire time, just nauseous.
Yeah.
It was just tough on her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, uh, that sucks. Sorry. Let's talk about he was 40 weeks, correct? When you
Yep.
guys start coming down towards the end and your guys are planning, when you're planning on giving birth, what was the thought process with that?
So it was April. Excuse me. My family, my mom and dad came to stay with us
Mhm.
because we wanted to have somebody help take care of the kids,
Yeah.
while we were at the hospital. I wanted to be there with her. And my mom came down, and my mom and dad came down, and she and I don't have a great relationship as it
Mhm.
is. My wife and her don't have a fantastic relationship either, and it was very tense
Yeah.
leading up to it. They came a little bit early. They wanted to see my kids.
Yeah.
Um, but it was tense that whole month they were there. And at the same time, she was down there. Her plan was she was going to stay here till a couple days after our son was born, and then they were going to go to my sister up in Indiana, where she was living at the time,
Yeah.
because she was getting ready to have her first child,
Oh, okay.
like a week after ours. So they came down, and then May 1st, we went in for the final checkup
Uh-huh.
because they were going to induce my wife on May 3rd, because that was like at like almost 41 weeks or something like that.
Mhm.
So we go in May 1st, heartbeat's good, everything's fine. He's in a great percentile for his height and weight.
Mhm.
And I remember the next day, I'm nervous. You're about to bring another life into the
Yeah.
world. It's going to be a change in your family dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
My son, who had been the baby up to that point, now he's going to be the middle child. It's going to affect your sleep schedule. It's going to affect all these things. And I remember feeling nervous. It's an excited
Oh,
nervous.
yes. Yes.
And I remember we were going to bed because they were doing it in a very bizarre way. We were going to have to come in at like midnight. So they wanted us to come in at midnight to be induced. And so we went to bed at like 9 o'clock just to try to get a couple hours of sleep.
Mhm.
And she told the nursing staff told my wife to call to see, to make sure before we head in. So she
Yeah.
calls. I didn't get any sleep. I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
doze off until probably 11:15, 11:30. So I got like 30 minutes and I wake up, I'm groggy. She calls. They said they're not ready for us yet. They'll call us. So we go back to sleep. It's like 2:15 in the morning,
Yeah.
and they tell us to come in. And so we get to the hospital, and I remember that morning. I remember very clearly the sprinklers were going off. Everything in Florida, I don't know if you've ever been, but everything in Florida is just meticulously maintained. You'd be amazed what grows there because it's hot and
Yeah.
humid year round. But I remember the sprinklers going off. I remember being in a fog. I'm exhausted. And I remember driving to the hospital. We get there. I got my wife's bags. We check in. I remember the smell of the hospital. I remember it was dull in there because the other people are sleeping in their rooms. And we check in. And I remember sitting there waiting, and the nurse comes in, and she goes to, she puts the jelly stuff on my wife's stomach.
Yeah.
She takes her little thing and she starts, looking for the heartbeat. And she's like, "Is there a specific side where the nurse usually looks for the heartbeat?" I remember thinking, she's new. She has no idea what
Yeah.
she's doing. She's a midnight, she's a skeleton crew. There's no, she doesn't know what she's doing.
Yeah.
So she goes and she gets the charge nurse. Charge nurse comes in, and she's doing the exact same thing. And there's not the thump, the thump, the thump, the thump, the
Yeah.
thump.
Yeah.
And at that point, you start to feel a little bit of a tingle on the back of your neck. And because I've always been an optimistic person. And I'm thinking there's some explanation for this. There's something that they just haven't figured out yet.
Yeah.
And then the doctor comes in, and the doctor starts doing her thing, the exact same thing. And then they bring in the, I think it was the X-ray tech, something. They come in, and she looks, and there is no movement at all on
Oh,
the screen. And I remember I'm thinking to myself, there's something wrong. There has to be something
there
wrong.
has to be. Yeah.
And I asked her, I said, is there a heartbeat? I'm holding back tears, I'm choking back tears. And she says, I'm sorry, I can't tell you anything. And then the doctor comes in and tells us that, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat.
Yeah.
I know it probably went further than the question that you were asking, but that was just kind of the culmination of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that is very similar to exactly what happened with us. And just that the news that there's no heartbeat and there's nothing that can be done is just so devastating. It's so unearthly to hear what, you guys were right there on the doorstep of giving birth. It's so sad. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. How
Thank
did
you.
you handle that news? What happened?
Before all of that happened, how I handled it was not very well, in the sense that I was at the time I was so out of touch with my emotions,
Yeah.
very emotionally unintelligent. Just we did not have a healthy relationship with emotion when I was growing up. They were something that was buried down, and a lot of times we'd eat our emotions, eat our feelings.
Yeah.
And I just remember I was crying. Um
Which is
I
very
was in
understandable.
disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was feeling, so many different emotions, that I was feeling sorry for my wife, who was still having to have this baby inside of her. I was scared, not knowing, what will happen next. Like, how are we going to handle this? How is my wife feeling with everything? Because as a man, at least me, I look at life as there are problems to fix. There are
Uh-huh.
things, there are problems and solutions. And you want to try to figure out how to handle this.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do in that situation. It's very confusing. It's frightening. It's scary. It's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
all at the same time. But I remember crying that day, and then later that day, thinking that I'd gotten it all out of my system, that I would just be back to normal, and that this was something bad that had happened, but that I would be okay, moving forward.
Yeah.
That this was
Yeah.
just something, I got over it that day. Um, I think it was a state of denial, like this, so to answer your question, not very well.
Well, I didn't handle it well either, so we're not at fault for mourning a loss. So, what were the next steps that you were told to perform?
So,
You were there to get induced. You guys were there to give birth. So, what was the next steps?
so I texted my mom, and I was just thinking ahead. I said, "Hey, can you put all the baby stuff in the garage?" I said there was no heartbeat,
Yeah.
and I remember the doctors coming in, and they, of course, they're apologetic for the most part. There were some that came in. He was in the wrong room. Came in giggling and laughing,
Yeah. Oh.
and like I wanted to just go out and follow him out into the hallway, but they came in and they gave us it was a folder with information on next steps.
Mhm. Mhm.
The worst part of that day for me was having to go and call like 5 or 6 different funeral homes
Oh.
on
Yeah.
what to do. And they were trying to push you to get it done, that day. At least that was how they made it seem, was that it had to be done that day. Um, so I was in the hallway trying to hold it together. My wife was very needy. She didn't want me to be gone for more than a few minutes.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I had to go out in the hallway and just kind of not comparative shop for funeral homes. That's not the right word, but just find one, you know.
Yeah, that suited you.
I had the money to spend on it, but at the same time, I thought of it differently at the time. So we just went with, you know, I know you're probably going to ask about what we did after that, but I went with a cremation.
Mhm.
And I'll go into my reasons for that later. But
Yeah.
um, you know, I let my mom know. I made a post on Facebook, you know, asking people to pray for us. The church that we were attending at the time, you know, my wife had reached out to them. The pastor called me, you know, asked if they could come by and see us the next day.
Yeah.
So just kind of, you know, trying to process that and having to deal with the aftermath of, you know, what to do with a dead body.
Yeah. It's a lot of mental taxation when you're already grieving and mourning and beside yourself. So
Mhm.
I, as you said, you don't like to use the term shopping around for a good funeral service, but it's sort of what it is. You're calling to see if the services that they provide would fit for you, and
Mhm.
it sounds like a very transactional thing, but it's really what it is. So
Yeah.
yeah. So you guys were there in the hospital in the room. They had given you the binder with all the information of things that you needed to do. What was the next medical step to deliver for you and your wife?
So what they told us was you can you can go and deliver naturally, but you
Uh-huh.
don't have the baby's help.
Yeah.
And so it can take like 3 days. And I told my wife, I said, look, you don't need to do that. I
Yeah.
said, I don't like, because I couldn't bear the thought of her walking around with a dead body inside of her
Yeah.
for several days and then having to go through all of that alone. And
Yeah.
so I pushed her to have a C-section. And I told her later, I said, you know, I shouldn't push that on you. She tells me that I didn't. You know, she said that she wanted to do that anyway. She regrets having a C-section.
Oh,
But I just remember I'm sitting out in the operating room because I'm so freaked out about the whole thing.
yeah.
But I didn't want to see them, you know, slicing her open. And so I'm sitting in the operating room, you know, I'm still crying. And I told him, I said, all right, I think I'm ready to go in. And I go into the operating room and my wife's there. They got the curtain around
Uh-huh.
her lower half.
Yeah.
And my wife is there and she's got this little blue baby right here on her shoulder, right next to her.
Oh,
She's tearing up, but she's kind of sedated.
yeah.
And I collapsed to the floor right there. And that was when the first time I saw him. And I remember crying, my boy, you know, over and over again.
Yeah.
And I remember the nurse, you know, kind of comforting me. Just it was just that was the hardest moment right there of that entire day. That was like the lowest point because before that, I was thinking, you know, I'm a Christian. I believe that God can do anything. And I remember up to that point thinking there's going to be some kooky
Some
explanation, you
yeah.
know, because when my son Daniel was born, his arm got caught when he was coming out,
Yeah.
and then he wasn't breathing when they first got him out, and so they had to rush the team in. But as soon as the team comes in, he
Yeah.
starts
Everything's
breathing,
fine.
everything's fine.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so I'm thinking at that point, you know, there's some kind of explanation. And then I go in and I see the lifeless body, and that was when every last little bit of hope dropped out of
Mm.
me.
I yeah. I had that same expectation of hope of like, these medical staff for some odd reason they don't know what they're saying, and my
Mhm,
son will be alive when we give birth, and there's that thread of hope, but
mhm.
when it is severed completely, it's and you're falling and dangling,
Yeah.
trying to grasp for some sort of hope. So I guess I'm so sorry. they finish sewing up Veronika, do they take you to a room where you and Veronika and Benjamin can be?
Yeah, no, I remember we got into the room and they brought the baby up, and as I said, I was just kind of emotionally disconnected from everything.
Yeah.
But I was completely freaked out by my son's body. I could barely bring myself to touch his cheek. I do remember in the room, they just kind of laid him on they had him just kind of laid out almost like a doll. They were
Oh,
washing him, they weren't very delicate. And I remember thinking, you're gonna hurt him. But at the same time, like it doesn't matter. He's gone. He's not in
yeah.
that
Yeah.
body. And she was trying, my wife was holding him. She was asking me if I wanted to. I said, I don't hold him. I said, I can't physically hold him. I don't regret it to this day. I don't regret not holding him. Um, I saw it and thought of it as a shell.
Yeah.
My mom came up, she brought our kids up, and, I saw him in the hallway. I walked up, I grabbed my kids, I hugged them tight, and then I started crying. I hugged my mom and we both cried on each other's shoulders. And then she came into the room and she was holding the baby. She had no problem holding the baby.
Hmm.
And I was just my kids were there looking at him and just asking questions. My son was 3 at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for him to kind of grasp exactly what was going on. But it was very difficult to watch him and watch my
Yeah.
daughter, because they were expecting to have another little brother. Um, so it was traumatic, but it was starting to become more real now that you
Yeah.
see the body.
Yeah. And you had your whole family there, you, your wife, your 2 children, and Benjamin. How did you explain to your children what had happened? Or was it when we had our son, our daughter was 4 at the time,
Mhm.
and I had no clue how to explain death to a 4-year-old. And she got to hold her little brother for a second, and when she left with my mother, she said, "Well, that was weird." And as a 4-year-old, I can just imagine not understanding the concept of the finality of death. What is this? Like, how did you
Mhm.
explain that to your children, or did you just say, "We'll cross that bridge in a little bit"?
No, I mean, obviously, there's going to be, there's a gap between we're getting ready to bring a baby home
Yeah,
and now we're not getting ready to bring a baby home.
yeah,
My mom told them that morning. My daughter, who was 6 at the time,
yeah,
she was a lot more understanding. She was acquainted with the concept of death. She cried that morning.
yeah,
Um, my son, I don't, my mom had told them because they were at home with her that
yeah,
morning. They told her, she told them that, that Benjamin was with Jesus. And my son, you know, I still today don't think he fully understands, but he'll talk about how sometimes he'll cry. We don't see it. I don't know if he does or not, but he says that sometimes he'll cry when he thinks about his little brother and
yeah,
and how he was supposed to have a little brother and things like that. So I didn't have to cross that bridge. My mom was,
yeah,
she was good about it. So they got to see the body, and I think that kind of helped them to understand,
yeah,
that he wasn't coming home with us.
yeah. Well, thank you for telling me that. What did you guys do after the hospital staff cleaned up your son? They gave him to you, and you mentioned that you didn't hold your son, but as a family, what did you guys do with Benjamin, for Benjamin? Did you guys do anything
You
with
mean
him?
service like burial,
Mm,
cremation?
well, I was going to say, like, did you guys read books to him? Did your wife sing songs to him? Did you know? Sometimes
No,
people.
she held him. I remember the nurse kept coming in and asking if we wanted pictures.
Hmm.
I remember thinking that was so creepy that it was so. I
Yeah.
kept getting almost indignant. I said, "Look, don't ask us that again."
Yeah.
I said, "We don't want pictures." I was speaking out of turn for my wife. I
Yeah.
was speaking from my own frustration. But I remember very vehemently telling her, "Do not ask us again." I said, "That's weird. I don't want pictures of this." But I didn't know at the time that this was something that people, this is something that
Yeah.
people did. This is something that
Yeah.
some people did to help them to get over it. I still to this day think that that's weird. If it helps somebody, if
Yeah.
that's how they want to grieve, for me personally, it was, when my grandma passed away, I didn't go and take pictures with her or anything
Yeah.
like that. Um, you know, when we went to Disney a couple months ago, we were down at our place in Florida. My wife got this sketch of the kids. It's like a tracing. It's a silhouette, a tracing of a
Uh-huh.
silhouette, and she wanted to do one with our son, with Benjamin up there. And she said, "Is that weird?" I said, "Look, I wouldn't do it. You know, I think of it in terms of if it was my grandma, I wouldn't have her silhouette in there, but
Yeah.
if it will help you," I said, "Do it." I said, "Okay, I'll pay for it, whatever, if that'll help you out." But we didn't read books or anything like that. To me, it was, he's not there.
Yeah.
It's just kind of his body. You know, I know that grief is it's a very unique experience. It's very relative to that person.
Yeah.
I remember our therapist after the fact, 'cause we did a grief group support kind of counseling thing. And I remember him telling you lose that child, but you don't lose the instinct to parent that child.
Hmm.
Um, but we didn't do, my wife held him and she cried with him, she cried on him. Um, until he started to turn really blue.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
she wanted to get one last time. He was perfectly developed in every single way. There was
Yeah.
not an issue with him. You know, he looked just like other kids
Mhm.
when they were born.
Yeah.
But we didn't do any kind of, books or pictures or anything like that. She got some pictures on her phone, but
Yeah.
beyond that, we didn't do anything professional or anything, books or anything like that.
Each individual's experience is for themselves. I what we did was different, but that was what we did. And so I'm glad that you were able to tell me. It's interesting. So when the time comes to give your son Benjamin to, did you give him to the nursing staff and they brought him to the representative from the mortuary, or did you guys interface with them personally?
No, the nursing staff did that, and it was. I remember being really, really frustrated because obviously you got a raw nerve open there,
Yeah, yeah.
and I had to I had to let the mortuary know. I had to let they said that I had to let the hospital security know that they were coming to take the body. I called the hospital security and left messages, and then the funeral, like it was like a day or two later, and
Uh,
they were telling me that they still hadn't come. And so I'm getting irate.
yeah.
I put on my Karen hat and I started, I'm like, what is going on? When are y'all
Well,
coming?
I need to speak
Because
to managers.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I need to speak to them. Because they're supposed to
Yeah.
be the professionals that you rely on in that moment. But,
Yeah.
um, you know, the nursing staff took him away and then he was taken by the funeral home.
And you opted for cremation.
Mhm.
Um, could I speculate is because you're moving around the nation and you don't really know where your final place would be? Is that sort of the thinking?
To me,
Or
that was part of it.
yeah.
And my wife and my daughter weirdly, because she's acquainted with death and grief now
Mhm.
because of this situation. But
Yeah.
they both have stated that they would prefer to be buried.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like it was. And I'm trying to think of how to put this in the best possible way.
You could put
I
it any way
didn't.
you want.
Yeah, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
my wife was carrying him around. I remember when we would get in the pool, he would kick. When he would hear my daughter's voice, he would move around and get
Yeah.
excited. But I didn't know it. When a loved one has passed away, we mourn for that person, the life that they lived.
Yeah.
For me, it was not like that. Um, I didn't know, we weren't going to be in Florida forever.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't see any reason to have a burial. We wanted to just do a cremation. I didn't want to have a service or anything like that. To me, funeral service, and everybody does what they think is best and right for them.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I didn't see any reason to have a service. You go and you talk about that person's life. My son never lived. He never took a breath outside of my wife. And, there was nothing for me, at least, to remember him. My wife was fine with cremation. So that was just kind of the route that we took.
Yeah. What are you going to do with his ashes? Are you may I ask, are you guys going to spread them anywhere? Are you guys just going to keep them, or
We had talked
when?
about doing something like that, spread him maybe somewhere in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
We still have them with us. They're in the little
Yeah.
blue urn with a little teddy bear on them. But we haven't really talked about it.
Yeah.
It's been a few
Yeah.
months since we even discussed what we were going to do. I don't know if she wants to. My son the other day asked me to look inside there. I took the lid off. I took the ashes out and showed him. But you know,
Yeah.
we haven't made any plans or anything like that. We've talked. It's been just vague discussions, but we haven't really talked
Yeah.
about anything concrete.
And maybe Veronica would like to be buried with them when she passes,
Could be, yeah,
60 years from now. So
yeah.
now, how has you've talked about you went to therapy and grief counseling. How has your post healing been? How have you dealt with it?
At the first 6 months of it were just kind of like being adrift. It
Yeah.
was like getting from day to day.
Yeah.
You going over one wave, and you going over the next, and just kind of in a daze.
Uh-huh.
Um, the 6 months after that, everybody says the first year is the hardest, but I think grief comes and goes. There were
Yeah.
days where I had really good days where I had really bad days.
Yeah.
But the second 6 months of that year, it was finding who I was again.
Yeah.
Our therapist had said something that stood with me and stayed with me, was that you're not going to be the same person anymore. And
Yeah.
I had the hardest time grasping that concept and just trying to figure out how to apply that to my life.
Uh-huh.
So for the first 6 months, I was in a daze. I was in a depression. We went to our house in Colorado. We had to do some repairs there. We had to get new flooring put down. We had to get it painted. Um, it was just kind of, you're there, but at the same time, you've got to
Yeah.
work and get things done. And so it was like just in a fog in a sense.
Yeah.
We were just
Yeah.
both kind of waiting for things to happen. Um, but we started going on hikes out there and just seeing some of the views. Veronica had never seen the mountains out there like that. I had been
Yeah.
previously when I was going out to look at the house, but we started going on hikes, and that was very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Going into the grief support groups helped tremendously. More so Veronica. As men, we tend to bottle things up more, and we try to figure out how to handle it ourselves.
Yeah.
But it did help to kind of hear some techniques and things to work on. So it definitely opened up my eyes to my own emotional immaturity. And in some ways I still am emotionally immature, but I now I recognize when I feel certain things, whereas before I would have no idea. Why am I feeling this way? You just go throughout a day,
Yeah.
in a terrible mood. Now I'm able to pinpoint those feelings and the source behind them. So if
Yeah.
there was a silver lining for me personally, it was that, also my wife and I, we were very, very close up to that. And we've gotten closer. We're still very, very close. Not as close as we were right after it happened.
Yeah.
It was like our souls had bonded,
Yeah.
through this. We were in the, you hear about people going to war together and experiencing
Yeah.
these terrible, traumatic things. And for us on an emotional level, it was something kind of similar to that, in that, we'd gone through this terrible thing together and we'd come out on the other side, and we really kind of needed each other after that.
Yeah.
And so we clung to one another and just were very, very close after that fact.
Yeah. When you're forged together through that pounding of grief, it's
Yeah.
sometimes it makes you stronger, and sometimes it exposes weaknesses that you need to work on. So
Mhm.
I'm glad you're able to emotionally grow as men. It's, as you said, sometimes we just push it down, tamp it down, and bottle up, and then it just you suffer because you have no clue how to solve it. So
Mhm.
yeah,
That's exactly it.
yeah. Well, how are you doing? And Benjamin was born about a year ago.
Mhm.
A year on, what are your insights that you've been able to see?
My wife, she will still from time to time get emotional if she hears something when we're in church, or if she
Yeah,
hears, for the first few months after that, we couldn't really see it. Like, it was
yeah,
really tough to see a baby,
yeah.
especially a newborn.
Uh-huh.
After that, my sister had her son about 9 days later.
Yeah. Oh.
It was really tough, because, and my wife, I'll say this, I'll kind of backpedal a little bit to something I'd forgotten to include, but um, my sister, when my parents were down staying with us, they had a
Uh-huh.
cat who unexpectedly passed away.
Your
Great
your
cat.
parents?
Yeah,
Your
my parents did. So
Okay.
my dad wasn't there the day my son had passed away. He had been gone. He had flown back up to North Carolina for a couple of days to take care of the cat, to
Yeah.
get it cremated or whatever, buried or whatever they did with it.
Yeah.
But um, my sister sent them like a buffet of sweets from a local bakery. Had it
Uh-huh.
delivered to them to help them. When my son passed away, she didn't say a word.
Yeah.
She didn't send a text. She didn't say, and I didn't expect, wasn't
Wow.
looking for
Yeah.
food or anything like
Yeah.
that, but she didn't send a text. We still to this day, it's been more than a year, and she's not made any effort to reach out. I've not reached out to her. I have no desire to reach out to her.
Yeah.
Um, when my dad came down, he didn't really talk a whole lot. He just said, "Man, it's crazy." He didn't really talk about it. Since then, my mom and I, we haven't really talked about it. Um, but you had asked me, what was it you were asking?
What have you sort of learned in these last years about yourself or about things? What is
Gotcha.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think you had also asked, how have I been, or how am I doing ever since it's been a
Yeah.
year now
Yeah.
since my son had passed. I They say that grief was, it doesn't go in the five stages,
Yeah.
anger, denial, depression.
Yeah. It's not
It
a
doesn't
linear.
follow in that.
Yeah. It's not a linear thing. It's
Right. It's not
yeah.
linear. It's not perfectly cyclical. It doesn't go in all of those.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through all of those at every single point, in order or anything like that. And so we kind of ping ponged around a little bit, but I would say, now my wife still struggles with it. She still,
Yeah.
as I said earlier, you lose that child, but you don't lose the desire to parent that child.
Yeah.
And I've poured myself more so into my kids, trying to spend more time with them,
Yeah.
um, working on myself. It does remind you that life is short, life is precious. I've been working on a lot more self improvement in the second half of it. In the second half of that first year, which the first year was the hardest year of my life.
Yeah.
But the second half of that, it was for me trying to forge kind of a new identity, and trying to figure out who I am.
Yeah.
Not who I was. but more
Mm-hmm.
so who I am now after this fact. So, for the most part, I would say I don't want to say I'm over it because it affected me deeply. It still
Yeah.
affects me to this day. Everything that has changed about me was a result of what happened
Yeah.
on that day. Now I don't think of it like for the first few months, I thought of us, our identity was that couple who lost a baby.
Yeah.
And so we were very measured and careful in who we shared it with or who we told it to. Because my wife didn't want a pity party. I didn't want a pity party. I didn't want people to feel bad for us.
Mm-hmm.
But it was going from that to now I think of it in terms as that was something really bad that happened to me. I
Yeah.
think of it in terms of a bad event in my memory, in my history. I don't feel as affected by it anymore. Like I said, I don't think I'm over it, but I do think the effect of it has dwindled
Yes.
drastically. If I sit and think about it, talking about it and talking about being in the operating room, I start to feel all kinds of emotions coming up.
Yeah.
And that's what I told my wife. I said, "Look, he's gone. We will never see him again in this life."
Yeah.
I said, "All we're going to do is bring it. Bring it's going to affect our kids who are living, who are still with us."
Yeah.
You know, so I think of it now in terms of that was something bad that happened, but now we're starting to look forward to the future again. We're planning on trying to have another baby later this year.
Mm-hmm.
She's very nervous about it.
Yeah.
I'm worried about it.
You.
What are the chances that lightning strikes twice?
Yeah.
Could it happen again? I think so,
Yeah.
but we've gotten through it before. I think we would get through it again.
Yeah.
So, we're in a good place. She cries a lot less, but I think that grief is something, as our counselor said, it's a part of us now.
Yeah.
And we just had to figure out a way how to assimilate that into our lives and personalities.
Yeah. Grief is always going to be a part of you, but it's not a defining feature of you, I
Hmm.
guess would be a good way to put it. We were camping last weekend next to a stream, and my daughter found some. Do you know what sea glass is? I guess would be a good way to.
Yeah.
She found some sea glass in the stream, and I instantly thought how interesting it is that when the bottle is first broken, it has so much potential to hurt you. But as it's gone through all the buffeting of the water and the sand and the rocks, and those sharp, dangerous edges have been knocked down to something smooth, the glass is, the patina, the frosting of the glass has changed it to
Hmm.
something that is, it can still hurt you if you break it. It could still create those sharp edges. But I was thinking about my grief. I was like, at first it was so raw and so dangerous and so, yeah, just like broken glass, it could really cut and cause problems. And then over time, I still have that glass with me, but it has been buffed, soft, and I
Hmm.
still have it, but it's not that potential. The potential has been
Yeah.
softened a little bit.
Hmm.
And that was one thing that really, like, as you were talking about, how do I move forward? Who am I going forward? I had dreams for my son who passed away. I had dreams for our family that involved him, and having to shift what my family and my future dreams and my future, I was excited to, teach my son Brandon how to play soccer or, how to do some woodworking and stuff like that. But I had to shift, I had to change, I had to temper those expectations and
Hmm.
finding who you are now without those things. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's rough on your psyche. So I'm glad that you're
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you're figuring out who you are now moving forward. because sometimes people get stuck and they never do. So,
Yeah, I
mm,
like to be a very productive person,
mm,
and there were times, like especially in the first 6 months, where I tried to figure out, am I being lazy or am I feeling depressed? So I didn't want to do anything
yeah,
after my son had passed away.
yeah,
So
yeah, and sometimes that's what you need to do. Sometimes you just have to do nothing. You
yeah,
know, the grief is taking a toll on your body, and it just can't do anything. So,
exactly.
wonderful. Scott, is there anything at the close of this episode? Is there anything that you would like to say about your son Benjamin? How he has affected and has made you a better man, or anything?
I like to think that we get told very often that our kids are great kids, they're very well behaved. I like to think that he would have been a good boy
Yeah,
and grown into a good man. Not under my tutelage, or not just because of my tutelage or anything like that, but I think that he would have been a good boy. I think he
yeah,
would have been a great man. I wish he was here.
yeah,
We'll always think about the moments of how old he would be.
yeah,
My wife met somebody at the park the other day. She made a friend there that had a baby who was born right or like within the same week.
yeah,
And so it was really tough for her to see. So we'll always think of those benchmarks. But I am grateful, for I guess the awakening of my emotional recognizing emotions
yeah,
within myself and how to manage them. But on the other side of it, I've come out more determined and with clearer vision. I will say this: my brain is all over. We talked earlier about high fantasy kind of things. My mind can go to some crazy far out places, especially within my business and things like that. I'm a lot more hyper focused now,
yeah,
which I never was before, able to weed out the distractions. So I'm grateful for those things as well.
yeah,
It changed who I am. I am a better person because of it. I'm a stronger person because of it. Um, you know, that's the silver lining to
yeah,
this whole situation.
yeah. Well, I'm glad that there is, what is life? We are here to progress, to become
Hmm.
better, to become more than what we were. So
Hmm.
the tragedy of losing a child sometimes helps us to grow to be better. And I'm glad that it is helping you. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Lee.